The yellow light filtered through the tall glass windows, casting shadows on the cold wooden floors of the luxurious apartment that had once been a haven of promises. In the dark corner of Betrayal, a woman stood there, her shoulders straight, and her eyes shining with the light that pain itself had forged. Tonight, she was no longer the girl who cowered in fear of lies. She was the one who knew how to turn tears into a flame, to burn away all falsehood. This was not a story of love lost, but the journey of rebirth of a woman determined to reclaim everything. And from here on, every whisper of the city, every footstep echoing across the wooden floor would carry her name, Emma Green, the one who turned betrayal into opportunity and transformed pain into her own dynasty. Listen closely, for this story is not just about revenge, it is proof that in this world, no one can bury someone who has found themselves again. Emma Green returned to New York on an autumn afternoon, the overcast sky stretching above the skyscrapers and the cold wind tugging at her brown hair. Her shoulders were weary, but her eyes still shone with excitement because this business trip hadn't only brought success for her company's crucial project, but also offered a brief respite before her dream wedding to Andrew Miller, the man she had once believed was her perfect other half. Emma stepped into the lobby of their upscale apartment, the click of her heels echoing coldly on the exquisite tiled floor. She paused for a moment to breathe in the familiar scent of the place that had once been her haven, but instead of the usual warmth, an unfamiliar sweet vanilla fragrance filled her nose. That scent made Emma freeze because she knew it all too well. It was Lily Green's favorite perfume, her sister. A flicker of unease like a tiny flame sparked in her chest. Her hands shook as she pushed open the bedroom door, the yellow light illuminating the empty footprints on the carpet. She pulled open the closet door, her heart tightening at the cold void where the pristine white wedding dress had once hung waiting for the big day. Before Emma could collect her thoughts, the phone in her pocket buzzed. It was Sophie Brown, her best friend who had always been there for her, like a shield through every storm. Sophie's voice came through quiet but firm. "Emma, sit down. There's something I don't know how to say." Emma's heart raced, but she forced her voice to stay steady. "What is it?" Sophie paused, then Sophie let out a breath. "Andrew and Lily got married. Yesterday. In your wedding dress." The words cut into her like an icy blade, leaving a silent wound. Emma gripped the phone so hard her knuckles turned white, her lips trembling. In an instant, she could hear the blood pounding in her ears. The city's noise outside the window sucked away, leaving only a dead, chilling stillness. Sophie whispered, "I tried to call you as soon as I found out, but your flight was delayed. Now, it's all over social media." Emma said nothing, Sophie's words echoing in her head, piercing every breath. She opened Instagram, her hand shaking as she scrolled through the photos. Andrew, the man who had promised to build a life with her, and Lily, the sister who had always whispered she'd be by her side now, hand in hand, beaming, in the dress that was supposed to be hers. Beneath the glittering lights of the lavish ceremony, they looked like the perfect couple, a nightmare wrapped in dazzling beauty. The mocking caption blazed across the screen, "When love just can't wait." Emma's eyes burned, but no tears would fall. It all felt like a cruel joke she hadn't prepared for. Every detail, every word. Andrew's recent cold gaze, Lily's sudden over-interest in the wedding plans, it all snapped together into a perfect puzzle leading to this moment. Emma swallowed the pain stuck in her throat, a silent decision flaring in her eyes. This was not the end. It was not the moment for her to break. In the weight of betrayal, a stubborn flame burst alight. She squared her shoulders, drew in a deep breath, and stepped out of the room that had become a vault for painful secrets. Emma knew this was only the opening chapter of a story she would not let anyone else write, and she would begin rewriting it right from this moment. Emma left the apartment in a daze, her feet moving without thought, carrying her through the long streets of New York awash in neon light. The city was still loud and vibrant as if mocking her pain. In her hand, her phone screen glowed the wedding photos of Andrew and Lily playing on loop like a nightmare film with no end. Emma's eyes scanned every detail: Lily's triumphant smile, Andrew's intimate embrace, the tender looks that should have belonged only to her. The flash of cameras, the cheers of the crowd, all of it had become a grotesque tableau of betrayal. Emma felt like a stranger lost in her own life, every memory of love and trust, now nothing more than ashes. She remembered the long nights spent planning the wedding, the endless notes she had scribbled while Lily had pretended to be excited to help, and the times Andrew had suddenly grown distant, which she had always convinced herself were just work stress. Now it all lay exposed like cruel puzzle pieces forming a perfect picture of betrayal. Emma stepped into a small corner cafe, the rich scent of roasted coffee doing nothing to banish the bitterness rising in her throat. She opened her phone, scrolling up and down, her hands gripping it so hard she felt she might shatter the screen. Each photo was a dagger thrust deep into her heart. The flood of congratulatory comments beneath the pictures praising Lily and Andrew for finding each other struck Emma's faith like a lash. Her lips pressed tightly together, swallowing back the sigh that threatened to escape. She didn't know how long she sat motionless beside the now cold latte. But then, in that moment, like a breeze passing through, she realized one truth: she had wasted too much time on people who didn't deserve it. Emma's trembling hand set the phone down, drawing in a long, slow breath. Her eyes were no longer wet, but glowed with a hard, cold light. Emma knew that if she let this pain crush her, she would never be able to lift her head again. And she wasn't born to be trampled. In the mirror behind the bar, Emma saw herself, a beautiful but unyielding face, slender shoulders still straight, and a fire smoldering in those determined brown eyes. Tonight, she would not cry. She would not send pleading messages, would not ask why, because Emma Green was no longer the naive girl who believed in empty promises. She stood the wooden chair, scraping softly, but inside her a decision rang out like a steel bell. She would not let them take her future, no matter if they were the people she had once loved or her own flesh and blood. And this time, Emma would not look back. That night, Emma sat quietly in the apartment that had become a battlefield of shattered trust, her hands trembling slightly as she opened her email and read Victor Hayes's message over and over, the man who had guided her through every step of her career. The agreement has been signed, Emma. Starting next week, you will officially take control of Blackridge Corporation. In that moment, the tears no longer threatened to fall. Instead, a steely resolve crept into every fiber of her being. Blackridge, the empire Andrew's family had once so proudly and arrogantly boasted of, now lay in her hands like a cruel gift from fate. Emma leaned back in her chair, eyes half closed, letting herself savor a brief moment of quiet before the real storm arrived. She remembered every time Andrew had spoken in that warm, reassuring voice, painting a future she now saw as a sweetly poisoned trap. She remembered how Lily used to laugh softly, her hand resting on Emma's shoulder, with deceptive warmth, hiding the razor-sharp blade behind it. Now Emma felt a strange calm settle in her heart. She was no longer the girl of hopes and longings, no longer the one always standing behind to let others shine. Now she was the one in power, and those who had underestimated her, who had trampled her, would never sit comfortably again. Emma rose and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the stream of cars with their blinking lights below. This city never slept, and neither would she. The yellow lights painted a moving picture of hurried lives, and in them she saw herself, someone ready to face any battle, who had finally found herself within it all. In her hands now was not just the Blackridge shares, but the only weapon she needed: the truth. And Emma knew, as long as she held firm, everything Andrew and Lily thought they had stolen from her would become nothing but a shadow behind her, right where they belonged. Emma pressed her lips together, her eyes cold and unyielding. The game had only just begun. And this time she wasn't playing to be accepted. She was playing to win not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed, ever been cast aside simply for daring to dream and believe in themselves. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth. No longer the soft smile of a bride-to-be, but the smile of a woman ready to enter any battle to reclaim what was hers. Emma no longer hesitated as she stepped into the luxurious apartment of Leona Davis, who had once been the quiet shadow by Lily's side, now the reluctant bearer of secrets. Leona stood in the warm yellow glow cast by an antique table lamp, her eyes glinting with sorrow as she looked at Emma. I don't know where to start," Leona whispered, her voice heavy with hesitation. Emma sat down on the deep green velvet chair, her hands clasped tightly together, patiently waiting. Leona swallowed hard, then spoke each word like a blade slicing through the curtain of secrets that had hidden everything. Lily orchestrated it all. She faked the messages, crafted a narrative about you having an affair with a colleague. Everything was to push Andrew away from you and into her arms. Emma didn't respond, only silently tightening her grip, feeling her nails dig into her skin. Leona bowed her head, her voice growing fainter. She stole your spare apartment key to make sure you couldn't stop them. In that moment, Emma felt her heartbeat slow, then surge like an undertow. She realized that those long, anxious nights hadn't been because she was weak, but because she had believed in the promises of those she trusted most. But now the betrayal no longer broke her. It only made her see her path forward more clearly than ever. Emma took a deep breath, looking straight into Leona's tear-filled eyes. "Thank you for telling me the truth." She said, her voice low and steady, with no hint of tremor. Leona bowed her head slightly, knowing that Emma was no longer the woman who could be easily broken. Emma stood, her black coat draping softly over her shoulders, her eyes gleaming with an unyielding coldness. She had lost everything she once trusted, but had found something more precious: clarity and faith in herself. This fight was no longer just about reclaiming what was hers. It was about rebirth from the ashes of lies. As she stepped out of the apartment, Emma left behind the chaos of those who had betrayed her. The New York night blazed with lights, and every step she took rang out like a vow that she would never be subdued. Not by those she once loved, nor by the past that had betrayed her. Because Emma Green understood the only true weakness was letting someone else write your story, and she would never give them that chance again. That night, the restaurant LeBlanc became the stage for a play that Emma had decided to direct herself. The heavy wooden doors swung open, piano music softly flowing, the crystal chandelier lights glinting down on tables draped in pristine white linen, wine glasses shimmering in the hands of guests engrossed in their own conversations. But everything fell silent when Emma entered, her black dress hugging her figure, her face expressionless and calm. Andrew's gaze faltered, the smile on Lily's lips froze when they saw Emma walking toward the banquet table like a queen who had reclaimed her throne. "I'm just here to enjoy the lamb," Emma said softly, her tone gentle yet challenging, her amber eyes flicking across Andrew's face, the man who once whispered love to her, but was now nothing more than a pawn in her game. Lily's hand tightened around her wineglass, her face pale, her eyes wavering under her sister's calm stare. Andrew quickly spoke up. "Emma, can we talk alone?" But she only tilted her head slightly, her subtle smile as sharp as a finely honed blade. "No need, Andrew." Her voice rose in the elegant space, calm yet commanding. "I'm only here to remind you two that next week there will be a very important gala. And I'm certain it will be a night you'll never forget." A taut silence stretched across the room, the guests who didn't understand a thing exchanging curious glances. But Emma didn't care. She slowly raised her glass, the deep red liquid catching the glimmer of the lights, a silent promise reflected in her eyes that their downfall had only just begun. Lily gasped, her voice cracking. "Emma, you don't understand this. This isn't—" But Emma didn't let her finish. Yes, she cut in, the smile gone from her lips. I'm not here to apologize or to hear any explanations. I'm here to show you that nothing is in your hands anymore. She set her glass down on the table, her finger tapping lightly against the polished wood like the opening bars of a symphony heralding a coming storm. Then Emma turned and walked away, leaving behind stunned stares and murmurs of curiosity from those who watched but didn't understand. Her footsteps were light, yet sure, as if the wooden floor itself bent under the heels of a queen. In Emma's heart, there was no space for tears or regret. Tonight, she had set the stage. And at the coming gala, she would be the brightest light, revealing every lie and betrayal to the gaze of everyone who had once laughed at her. Emma Green stepped out of LeBlanc, her silhouette merging with the dazzling New York night, leaving behind a declaration unspoken. This revenge would have no room for the weak or for trembling hearts. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the glass windows of Capital Coffee, casting a warm golden glow across Emma's face. But in her heart, there was only one thing: the cold steel of determination. Cameron Foster, the auditor who had arranged to meet her the night before, sat in a corner of the cafe. His charcoal gray suit perfectly pressed his manner calm, but his eyes sharp. As Emma approached, he merely nodded, sliding a thick stack of documents across the table toward her. "You'll want to see this before the gala," Cameron said in a low, unhurried voice, as if they were discussing the weather instead of a secret that could bring down an entire family. Emma opened the file, each smooth page smelling of fresh ink. Her eyes swept quickly over the cold numbers, the illegal transactions, and the secret accounts Andrew had quietly opened in Lily's name. The embezzled money wasn't just numbers, it was the living proof of betrayal and deceit. She looked up, meeting Cameron's gaze, a look that held no pity, only respect, and a glint of interest at the icy calm in Emma's eyes. "Andrew didn't just steal money," Cameron said softly, his voice as deep as a cello in the quiet cafe. "He built everything, but the account receiving the funds is in Lily's name. When this comes out, he'll pin it all on her. And Lily, she'll be the perfect scapegoat." Emma pressed her lips together, her fingers tracing the final number before closing the file. Her eyes burned with a bright, fierce light, not the weak flame of the wounded, but the blaze of a warrior who sees her enemy clearly and knows what must be done. "I want copies of everything," she said, her voice calm, but as unyielding as steel. "And I want you present at the board meeting next week. I don't just want them to hear it from me, I want them to see the evidence." Cameron tilted his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm already prepared," he replied, his tone light, but his eyes as sharp as a blade. As Emma rose, she felt each step of hers echo like a triumphant melody in a victory march. Outside, the crowds of New York still rushed by, but to her everything seemed to slow, to sharpen, to grow more intense. Andrew thought he could hide everything behind expensive suits and false smiles, but Emma knew the truth always had a way of rising, and she would be the one to bring it to light, every number, every lie, so that no one could hide or escape the net of justice she was casting. The day of the Black Ridge Corporation board meeting came faster than Emma had expected, but she felt no fear. Her brown hair was neatly pulled back at the nape of her neck, her tailored black suit hugging her slender frame, yet radiating an undeniable power. She stepped into the large boardroom, the polished wooden floor reflecting the light from the crystal chandelier above the glossy black leather chairs arranged in a perfect oval. All eyes turned toward her, the finance directors, the longtime investors, and finally Andrew, sitting at the head of the table, his arrogant expression barely masking the flicker of unease at the corner of his mouth. Emma walked forward and set the thick stack of documents in front of her, the sound of paper hitting the table ringing out like a hammer striking the surface of a still lake. "I have proof that Andrew Miller embezzled millions of dollars from Black Ridge Corporation," she said, her voice unwavering. All whispers died down, leaving only the rustling of paper and the sharp cutting stares aimed at Andrew. Cameron Foster sat beside Emma, his laptop already open, each financial chart, each secret bank account laid out on the large screen, like bullets aimed directly at the mask Andrew had used to hide the truth. Andrew fumbled, his voice trembling. This is a misunderstanding. I was only temporarily restructuring the finances. But Emma didn't let him build up any kind of shield. Temporarily, she smirked, her eyes lighting up like headlights cutting through the darkness. Then why are these transfers in an account under Lily Green's name? And why did you forge signatures to authorize them? A deadly silence fell. Then a voice, old but firm, came from the end of the table, the chairman of the board who had once trusted Andrew without question. Andrew, is this true? His voice no longer carried the tone of gratitude, only the weary weight of disappointment. Andrew opened his mouth but couldn't speak a word. Emma didn't need to wait for an answer. She looked straight at each board member, her voice resolute. Blackridge is facing a crisis of trust. I believe the only way to rebuild this company's honor and transparency is to change its leadership, starting with removing the man who betrayed us. An old hand was the first to rise, then others slowly followed, like the hammering of fate on the coffin of Andrew Miller's career. Emma's eyes didn't waver, each breath in sync with the room's heartbeat. When the final hand was raised, a faint smile crossed her lips. Not one of wild triumph, but of calm certainty and newly claimed power. Andrew's face went pale, his voice breaking like a sob. Emma, you don't understand. But Emma simply turned away, her gaze as calm and reflective as glass, her voice quiet but echoing through the room. I understand better than anyone, Andrew. I understand that a traitor is not worthy of anything, least of all trust. And with those words, Emma Green officially became the new face of Blackridge, not because she was chosen, but because she had claimed it piece by piece with intelligence, resilience, and a faith that nothing could shake. When the meeting ended, the air in the room still held the scent of power and the echo of irreversible decisions. Emma stepped out into the long hallway lined with gray carpet, each step of hers seeming to glide across the firm ground of her own life. But she did not walk alone. Only minutes later, Lily appeared at the end of the hallway. Her blonde hair disheveled, her blue eyes brimming with tears, a look of panic Emma had never seen before. Emma, you have to believe me. I didn't know. Andrew said it was the only way to save him. Lily's voice trembled, each word a shallow, gasping breath. Emma looked at her, her gaze still calm, though deep inside a storm of emotions churned. She remembered Lily in her wedding dress, the smug smile of someone who thought she had won. But now in front of her stood only a girl caught in the whirlpool of lies, lost in a web of ambition and blind love. Emma let out a soft sigh, her voice ringing out like a quiet verdict. You're not a victim, Lily. You chose to step into this game. But now you have a chance to do the right thing, not for me, but for yourself. Lily's eyes wavered, but within them a faint glimmer of hope began to flicker. Emma handed her a thick stack of documents, the proposal for the creation of a support fund for victims of financial fraud, a project she had long envisioned, a project she believed could turn pain into strength for those who had been wronged. I want you to lead this project. Emma said, her voice no longer cold but firm with resolve. You've seen the dark side of greed, of betrayal. Turn it into a force to protect those who have no chance. Lily trembled slightly, her lips parting as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. A tear slid down her cheek, no longer the tears of weakness, but of someone who had seen a path out of her own darkness. Why? Why are you doing this for me? Lily asked, her voice hoarse, choked with emotion. Emma looked deep into her sister's eyes, a small smile flickering on her lips, the smile of someone who had stood at the edge of the abyss and still stood tall. Because Emma Green is no longer the girl who just cries in the dark. And because I believe that sometimes the only way to truly win is to turn the one who betrayed you into your greatest ally. Then she placed her hand on Lily's shoulder. No longer the sister who had been betrayed, but the one who was showing the lost a different path, a path where there was no place for deceit or weakness. In that moment in the long hallway of Blackridge, Emma knew she had done what not everyone could: turn pain into power, turn an enemy into an ally, and write her own story anew. The next morning, the final trial to sentence Andrew Miller took place in an atmosphere so tense, it felt as though the entire room was holding its breath. Emma sat upright on the bench reserved for spectators, her gaze unwavering as the elderly judge began to read the sentence: Andrew Miller, for the crimes of fraud and embezzlement. This court sentences you to 15 years in prison without parole. A faint rustle sounded as Andrew bowed his head. The once proud face of the man who had thought he could manipulate everything now laid bare. Emma did not turn away. She met his resentful gaze with one of steadfast calm, no longer fueled by anger, only the resolve of someone who had reclaimed everything with her own hands. When she stepped outside, reporters crowded the courthouse steps, cameras and microphones aimed at her like a tidal wave. "Miss Green, do you have any comment to make?" One reporter asked, his voice a mix of anticipation and curiosity. Emma paused, her brown hair lifting slightly in the morning breeze, the flash of cameras casting a brief glow on her resolute yet proud face. "This is not just justice for me," Emma said, her voice rising like a declaration above the city's bustling noise. "It is a reminder to everyone who has ever been betrayed or belittled. We can always rise. We can always reclaim what is ours." The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat, then scattered applause broke out. Not for Emma's victory, but because they saw a woman who had turned pain into a sword and carved her own path through the darkness. That afternoon, Emma returned to the headquarters of Blackridge Corporation, where she had officially been appointed CEO. The warm yellow light poured over the glass walls, reflecting the image of a woman who was no longer afraid, who would never again let anyone else write her story. She looked down at the city slowly sinking into twilight, her eyes shimmering, not because of the lights but because of the glow of faith she had found within herself again. Emma knew there would be more battles to come, more storms ahead, but she also knew that she was no longer a victim. She was a creator, the captain of her own destiny. In that moment, as the city's sound seemed to quiet, Emma Green, the new CEO of Blackridge, smiled. It was not the smile of someone who had taken revenge, but of someone who had been reborn from the ashes of betrayal and was ready to turn everything into the road leading to her future. In the final glow of that day's sunset, Emma Green stood on the balcony of the Blackridge building, her eyes gazing far into the horizon, sparkling with lights. All storms had passed, but she knew the waves would never truly stop. What mattered was not what the betrayers had done, but how she turned those wounds into the launch pad for her own invisible strength. And if you, like Emma, have ever been deceived or dismissed, remember, never let anyone else write your story. Take hold of the pen and start your next chapter today. If you want to keep following the journey of those who refuse to bow down, don't forget to subscribe and share this video. Because Emma's story is only just beginning, and I believe yours is too.